Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I'm at a different location at the moment, but I wanted to get this video out. It's already a couple of days late. I wanted to talk about the girls basketball in Massachusetts, where one opposing team had a male player and three players, female players, ended up getting injured. So one team had a male player who was 6 feet with facial hair, who identifies as a woman. So a coach forfeited the basketball game because his players kept getting injured. This is over in Massachusetts. The game didn't even last longer than 16 minutes. It didn't even get to the second half when the coach decided to forfeit the game because he couldn't afford for any more of his players to get injured, with the playoffs coming up. Funny enough, it appears the female players were worried about getting excluded due to injury. And one play that resulted in injury was caught on camera. Take a look. So you see there, they were wrestling for the ball, and the young lady was slammed to the ground and struggled to get up, holding her back. Clearly she was hurt, and that happened to be the one that was caught on camera. And of course, the activists are going to say, injuries are part of the game, injuries occur all the time. But the fact is, statistically, a female player, a woman, is more likely to get injured when competing against men, when competing against male athletes. The chances of injury increases significantly more when playing against other women. That's why, I have to say it again, there are categories in sports to protect people, to make sure that it remains fair and, most importantly, safe. And the reality is, no female athlete should have to worry about being slammed to the ground by a male player. So this was the Collegiate charter school of Lowell. That was the team that forfeited, and they were up against KIPP. Apparently, they have played before, and there were no incidents prior to this current game. Apparently, there were no incidents. So the coach didn't think perhaps it wasn't a good idea to allow his female players to go up against a team who has a male player. Perhaps the coach didn't realize that it wasn't a good idea. Why? I do not know. But he soon got a reality check when 3 players ended up getting injured before the game was even halfway through. So here's what the school said. The bench was already depleted going into the game, with the 12-player roster having 4 players unable to play, said Cassie Crane, who was the Collegiate charter school spokesperson. When the coach saw 3 more go down, in the first half, leaving him with 5 players, he made the call to end the game early. The upcoming charter school playoffs were looming, and he needed a healthy and robust bench in 4 days. Once the third was injured, the remaining 5 expressed concern to him about continuing to play. The players feared getting injured and not being able to compete in the playoffs. In an effort to maintain the safety of his team, he decided to forfeit. Obviously, when you're involved in sports, you have to get used to nerves. It's natural to have that adrenaline before a game. Absolutely natural. But what I consider unnatural is the fear of having to go up against a male player and being worried about getting hurt. That is an unnatural fear that no female athlete should have to endure. No female athlete should have to go through that because males do not belong in female sports. If they did, there would be no such thing as categories to begin with. And that's never going to change. Sports will always be categorized by sex. And the moment that is no longer the case, there is no female sports. There is no women's category. It's very simple. So this is uncharted territory that these young women are now dealing with in 2024. The fear of having to go against a male player, the fear of knowing that your chances of getting injured are greater, the fear of knowing that the sort of injury that you face is more severe. because you're going against somebody who is built differently, no matter how much hormones they take, no matter how long they've been transitioning, no matter how they identify. They are built differently, and the advantages they have don't magically go away due to identity. And it's about time that we start considering biology. It's about time that biology trumps identity. Biology has to matter at some point before a tragedy occurs or before somebody's career has ended permanently. And now that's already happened. We saw with Peyton McNabb. She had hopes and dreams of continuing to compete in a sport that she loves. But when she was injured at the hands of a male player, those dreams were dashed. Her main concern now is recovering and, healing. And what I find ironic is all of this is under the guise of inclusion. But it's the women who are not being included. It's the women who are being excluded and have to worry about being excluded from the playoffs due to injury, missing out on crucial competitions due to injury. It's the women who are having to deal with that. That is exclusion. It's the women who are self-excluding because they don't want to compete against men. They don't want to have to change in a locker room where males are present. So they're self-excluding. Not only that, they're being taken out by male players. They're being taken out of the game, being taken out of a sport that they love because of male players. So what about inclusion of the people who the sport was designed for? The women. Why is their inclusion not considered? Why is their inclusion not important anymore when it's their sport? And this school further went on to say in the statement that they're committed to inclusion, but only the inclusion of a certain kind of individual, men who identify as women. Meanwhile, the women have to take the steps necessary to make sure they can make the playoffs after having to compete against a male. Now, I always wonder, why do coaches allow this? Why do coaches set their female players up to have to compete against men? Why do coaches allow their team to have male players when this is women's sports? A lot of the time, it's because they simply want to win. They simply want to win. And that is at the expense of the women, of the safety of the female players, of the female athletes. They're also excluded due to losses. After competing against somebody with an unfair advantage, after competing against somebody who is essentially cheating, women end up being excluded because of that, due to losses, due to not qualifying for certain events, for certain competitions, because their spot has been taken by a male. Again, why is that okay? Why isn't inclusion of importance when it comes to the female players who miss out on competitions, who miss out on progressing further in their athletic endeavors because their spot has been taken, has been stolen by a male player? And here we see an example of women getting injured. Are those women who were injured in the game going to be able to go on to the next game? We do not know. It's a real possibility that they will not be able to. But nobody cares, as long as we appease somebody's identity. And this was only 16 minutes into the game. Can you imagine if they had carried on? Would there have been any female players left? Carl Helzer, Collegiate's athletic director, told the Daily Item the KIPP player didn't have anything to do with the decision to forfeit. The two teams previously played each other on December 12th with a 36-29 KIPP win. No surprises there that KIPP won. Collegiate said in a statement that the remaining healthy players feared getting injured and not being able to compete in the playoffs. The statement also said the school reiterates its values of both inclusivity and safety for all students. When asked by the Daily Item, KIPP Academy Athletic Director Anthony Grimaldi declined to say whether the school believes the male player who identifies as female was the reason Collegiate forfeited. Interesting. So they don't want to come out and say, oh, it had nothing to do with the male player. They can't confirm or deny. They're just playing it safe. What I think it's safe to say is when girls compete against a 6'4" male player, they are more likely to get injured. It's absolutely safe to say that. In a game that involves jumping, pushing, shoving, wrestling the ball away from somebody, defense moves, marking somebody where you're in close proximity with an opponent, making sure that you're preventing them from getting the ball. The girl who has to mark that 6 tall player, all of that only increases their chances of getting injured. You're both jumping up. You can easily knock into each other. You could easily end up getting knocked to the ground. All of these things are possibilities in basketball and in other sports, especially when there is close contact. Chances of the girl getting injured when up against a male player are greater. That's just fact. Anybody who denies that is going to have to explain to me why we have categories in sports then. Why was there a need for categories to begin with? And the need for those categories don't go away just because of identity. So this is the policy that started it all. Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association's Handbook, section 43.3.1 states that a student shall not be excluded from participation on a gender-specific sports team that is consistent with the student's bona fide gender identity. Section 43.3.2 says a student can't be included on a roster solely for the purposes of gaining an unfair advantage. So let's take a look at some of the comments. Zeke says, my daughter is my Achilles heel. I'm the typical protective dad, and I make no apologies over it. I know exactly how I'd behave if I saw this man do this to my little girl. Again, no apologies. Where are the protective dads? Where are the men who would step up and stop this? Even if it wasn't their kid, where are the men who stand shoulder to shoulder with other men and say, not on my watch? Am I that much of an old relic? Please tell me I'm not. This is ridiculous. Men can't play in women's sports, period. Either abide by those rules, or all parents need to pull their kids out of those schools. It shouldn't be up to the minors to solve this issue. Absolutely. Parents need to collectively pull their daughters out and say enough is enough. Without women, there's no women's sports. I don't care how many male players identify as women. Without the females, there is no women's sports. So once these girls are pulled out of these competitions, who's going to watch that? Nobody. Every dad watching their daughter play against this dude is a coward. Wow. The coach didn't withdraw because of the guy, but because of fear of players being hurt. He should have called out the male player as the cause. Of course, people are not going to want to do that because they don't want the backlash, they don't want to be accused of anything. We're seeing a lot of that. Those are the comments, those are the reactions. I'm sure there's the other side. We had the person saying that it wasn't due to the male player, but the fact is injuries are more likely to occur when you make girls compete against men. Even the team who had the male player didn't even deny that it was due to the trans athlete. They just didn't comment. So I think that says it all. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.